He's not my son. This isn't the truth.
The alarm clock glowed 2:47 a.m. when Ashley Carter slammed through our bedroom door like she was auditioning for a SWAT team raid. Her perfectly styled blonde hair was disheveled, her designer dress wrinkled, and her eyes blazed with the kind of righteous fury usually reserved for people who'd been wronged by the universe itself. "We need to talk, Nathan," she announced, dropping her purse with a theatrical thud that probably woke half the neighborhood. I sat up in bed, squinting at my wife of 8 years. She'd been out with the girls again, the third time this week. The girls who apparently kept vampire hours and met at establishments that didn't close until the sun came up. "How was your evening?" I asked, keeping my voice level. Years of working in corporate IT had taught me the value of staying calm when systems were crashing around you. "Don't start with your passive-aggressive BS," Ashley snapped, kicking off her heels, hard enough to leave scuff marks on our hardwood floor. "I'm sick of it. I'm sick of you constantly checking up on me, asking where I've been, who I was with. It's suffocating." I blinked slowly, processing this information. In the past month, I'd asked her exactly 3 times about her late nights. Each time she'd given me vague answers about networking events and girls' nights that seemed to involve more booze than actual networking or female companionship. "I asked if you had a good time," I said carefully. "That's not exactly an FBI interrogation." "See? There it is again." She threw her hands up like I'd just proven her point. "You're so clingy, Nathan. So needy. I can't breathe in this marriage anymore." Clingy. The word hit me like a slap. I thought about our relationship over the past year. I worked 50 hours a week at Henderson Tech Solutions, managed our household finances, did half the cooking, and asked for exactly nothing in return, except basic courtesy. If wanting to know why my wife stumbled home at 3 in the morning smelling like expensive cologne that wasn't mine made me clingy, then apparently I was guilty as charged. "Ashley, I think we should talk about this when I'm what? Sober enough to deal with your insecurities?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I've been thinking about this for months, Nathan. You smother me. Every text asking when I'll be home, every casual question about my friends. It's like being married to a security guard." I sat there in my pajamas, watching my wife dismantle our marriage with the efficiency of a professional demolition crew. The rational part of my brain noted that she was deflecting, turning her suspicious behavior into my character flaw. The emotional part just felt tired. "I need space," she continued, pacing now like a caged animal. "Real space. Time to figure out who I am without you constantly hovering over me." "Space," I repeated flatly. "Yes, space. Room to breathe, room to live my life without having to report to you every 5 minutes." I looked at Ashley, really looked at her. The woman I'd married had been spontaneous but grounded, independent but loving. This person standing in our bedroom was a stranger wearing my wife's face, demanding freedom from a prison I didn't even know I'd built. "How much space are we talking about?" I asked. "I don't know. Maybe I should stay at Kira's for a while. Maybe we should consider a trial separation." Kira. Ashley's best friend since college. A woman who'd been divorced twice by 35 and treated marriage like a temporary inconvenience. Of course, Ashley wanted to stay with Kira. "Fine," I said quietly. Ashley stopped pacing. "Fine. You want space? You've got it." I swung my legs out of bed and stood up. "Take all the space you need." For a moment, she looked uncertain, like she'd expected more of a fight. Then her expression hardened again. "Good. I'll pack some things in the morning." "Don't bother," I said, walking to our closet. "I'll be gone before you wake up." "Nathan, what are you want space, Ashley? I'm giving you the whole house." I pulled out my largest suitcase and started throwing clothes into it. "Congratulations. You just got more space than you ever dreamed of." She stood there, watching me pack with growing alarm. "You can't just leave. We need to discuss this like adults." "Adults," I said, folding my work shirts with mechanical precision, "don't come home at 3 a.m. smelling like another man's cologne and then blame their spouse for being concerned about it." The color drained from Ashley's face. "I don't know what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating a fact." I zipped up the suitcase and grabbed my laptop bag. "You smell like Armani Code. I wear Old Spice. Unless you've been hugging a lot of strangers tonight, there's really only one explanation." "Nathan, you're being ridiculous." "No, Ashley, I'm being practical." I headed for the bedroom door, then paused. "You wanted space. Now you have all of it. Enjoy burning in it. I walked out of our bedroom, out of our house, and out of our marriage. It was 3:15 a.m. on a Tuesday in October, and I was finally free. The drive to my office took 20 minutes. Henderson Tech Solutions had a shower in the employee break room and a couch in the conference room that would work until I figured out my next move. I'd lived through worse. College dorms, my first apartment, with 3 roommates and 1 bathroom. I could handle this. By sunrise, I'd made a list. Find an apartment. Transfer my direct deposit to a personal account Ashley couldn't access. Call a lawyer. Start over. Ashley called 17 times that day. I let every call go to voicemail. Her messages progressed from angry to confused to panicked to furious again. The last one, left at 11:47 p.m., was a masterpiece of projection and blame. Nathan, this is insane. You can't just disappear because we had one fight. I never said I wanted a divorce. I just needed some space to think. Call me back. We can work this out. But I was already 3 states away by then, driving toward a new job, a new apartment, and a new life. Space, it turned out, was exactly what I'd needed too. 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days after I'd walked out of my marriage, Ashley Carter appeared at my apartment door like a bad penny with a law degree. She was holding a toddler and wearing the kind of desperate expression usually reserved for people who just realized their parachute had a hole in it. "Hello, Nathan," she said, trying for casual but landing somewhere closer to manic. "We need to talk." I stood in my doorway, coffee mug in hand, taking in the scene. Ashley looked older, thinner, with the kind of stress lines that come from poor life choices catching up with you. The kid in her arms was maybe 3 years old, with dark hair and brown eyes that looked nothing like either of us. "Ashley," I said evenly, "this is unexpected. Can we come in? It's important." I considered my options. I could slam the door, but that would only delay the inevitable. Ashley had tracked me down across 3 states. She wasn't going to give up easily. Better to find out what fresh hell she'd brought to my doorstep. 5 minutes, I said, stepping aside. She bustled into my small but tidy apartment, looking around like she was cataloging everything for a future lawsuit. The toddler stared at me with the kind of solemn curiosity that small children reserve for strangers. "Nice place," Ashley said, though her tone suggested she thought it was anything but nice. "Very minimalist." "It suits me. What do you want, Ashley?" She took a deep breath, shifted the kid to her other hip, and launched into what was clearly a rehearsed speech. "Nathan, I know our marriage ended badly, but we both made mistakes. I've had 3 years to think about things, and I realize I may have been too harsh." "Cut to the chase," I interrupted. "You didn't drive however many hours just to apologize, for being a cheating wife." Her face flushed. "I never cheated. Ashley, the cologne, the late nights, the sudden need for space. I wasn't born yesterday." I took a sip of my coffee and waited. She shifted tactics, her voice taking on a vulnerable quality that might have worked 3 years ago. "This is Max," she said, bouncing the toddler slightly. "He's your son." I nearly choked on my coffee. "My what now?" "Your son. He was born 8 months after you left. I know the timing seems impossible," I said flatly. "Unless you were pregnant when you came home smelling like another man's cologne, which would make this conversation very different." Ashley's face went through several interesting color changes. "I was pregnant, Nathan. I just didn't know it yet. I was stressed about our marriage. My cycle was irregular." "Stop." I held up a hand. "Just stop. You're telling me that you were pregnant with my child, didn't know it, and instead of mentioning this minor detail during our divorce proceedings, you waited 3 years to show up at my door." "The divorce was never finalized," she said quickly. "We separated, but we never actually filed papers." That was true. I'd been so eager to start fresh that I'd simply left. Legally, we were still married, though I'd been careful to keep my finances completely separate. "Even if I believe this story," I said, "which I don't, why now? Why not call? Why not send a letter? Why show up unannounced?" Ashley's composure cracked slightly. "Because you owe me, Nathan. You abandoned us. You left me to raise our son alone while you ran off to play Bachelor in whatever city this is. Columbus, Ohio, and I left because my wife was cheating on me. I wasn't... Ashley, we've established that you're not a reliable narrator. Let's move on to what you really want." She straightened, and I saw a flash of the old Ashley, calculating, manipulative, always working an angle. "I want what's fair. 3 years of back child support, medical expenses, daycare, everything you should have been paying if you'd been a responsible father. I stared at her for a long moment, then started laughing. It wasn't a pleasant laugh. "You're serious," I said finally. "You actually think you can show up here with a random toddler and convince me to pay you money?" "He's not random. Ashley, even if this kid were mine, which he's not, you'd need proof. Birth certificates, DNA tests, medical records. Evidence." She fumbled in her oversized purse and pulled out a manila folder. "I have all of that. Birth certificate, hospital records, everything." I took the folder and flipped through it quickly. The documents looked official enough, but something felt off. The birth certificate listed Nathan Carter as the father, but the paper quality seemed wrong. The hospital letterhead looked slightly blurry, like it had been photocopied multiple times. "These are interesting," I said, closing the folder. "Tell me, what hospital was Max born at?" "St. Mary's in Cleveland. And the attending physician was Dr. Jennifer Walsh." "Yes." "Fascinating. Because St. Mary's in Cleveland closed in 2019, and Dr. Jennifer Walsh has been dead for 6 years." Ashley's face went white. There must be some mistake." "The only mistake here is you thinking I'm stupid enough to fall for this." I handed the folder back to her. "These are forgeries, Ashley. Bad ones." "You're wrong. I'm really not, but just for fun, let's say I was. Let's say this kid is mine and these documents are real. You still have a problem." "What problem?" "The problem where you waited 3 years to tell me about my alleged son. The problem where you never put me on the birth certificate during the actual birth. The problem where any family court judge would take one look at this situation and laugh you out of the building." Ashley's desperation was showing now. "Nathan, please. I need help. I'm broke. I lost my job. I can't make rent. And that's my problem. How? Because he's your son." "No, Ashley, he's not." The apartment fell silent, except for the soft sounds of the toddler playing with Ashley's necklace. I looked at the kid again, really looked at him. He was cute enough, but he didn't look like me. He didn't look like Ashley either, come to think of it. "Whose kid is he really?" I asked quietly. Ashley's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I told you. The truth, Ashley. For once in your life, just tell the truth." Before she could answer, there was a sharp knock at my door. I glanced through the peephole and saw a familiar figure in an expensive suit. "That would be my lawyer," I said, opening the door. Robert Redmond stepped into my apartment with the confident air of a man who'd seen every scam in the book and had the legal firepower to shut them down. He was in his late 40s, impeccably dressed, and had the kind of sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Mr. Carter," he said with a slight nod. Then he turned to Ashley with a smile that could have frozen hell. "And you must be the former Mrs. Carter. How delightful to finally meet you." Ashley clutched the toddler tighter. "Who are you?" "Robert Redmond, attorney at law. Mr. Carter retained my services this morning after you called his office making certain claims." I hadn't called Ashley's office. I'd called my own HR department to give them a heads up about potential maltreatment, and they'd recommended Redmond. The man worked fast. "I don't understand," Ashley said. "It's quite simple," Redmond said, settling into my armchair like he owned the place. "You've made fraudulent claims about paternity and are attempting to extort money using falsified documents. That's several felonies, Mrs. Carter." "I'm not—" "Oh, but you are." Redmond opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "You see, Mr. Carter asked me to do a little research after your phone call. Imagine my surprise when I discovered that the birth certificate you're carrying was created using a template downloaded from a website that sells novelty documents." Ashley's face went ashen. "But that's not the best part," Redmond continued cheerfully. "The best part is that the child you're claiming is Mr. Carter's son is actually named Michael Thompson, age 3, and he belongs to your brother Eric. Eric Thompson, who reported his son missing from a playground in Akron yesterday afternoon. The toddler, Max or Michael or whatever his name was, chose that moment to start crying." Ashley bounced him frantically, but her hands were shaking. "That's not— You can't prove— Actually, I can." Redmond pulled out his phone and showed Ashley the screen. "Eric filed a police report 6 hours ago. He's been looking everywhere for his son. Imagine his relief when I called to tell him little Michael was safe." You called Eric? Ashley's voice was barely a whisper. I did. He should be here any minute, along with the police. Child endangerment is a serious charge, Mrs. Carter. Add in the fraud, the attempted extortion, and the abduction, because that's what taking a child without permission is called, and you're looking at some serious prison time. Ashley stood abruptly, still holding the crying child. I have to go. I'm afraid not, Redmond said calmly. The police are already downstairs. You're not going anywhere. As if summoned by his words, there was another knock at the door. This one was more authoritative, accompanied by a voice calling, Police, open up! I opened the door to find two uniformed officers and a man in his 30s who looked like a younger male version of Ashley. Eric Thompson pushed past the police and rushed toward his sister. Ashley, what the hell is wrong with you? He demanded, reaching for the toddler. You can't just take Michael from the playground. I was babysitting, Ashley said weakly, but she handed the child over without resistance. Babysitting? I've been looking for him for 8 hours. I thought he'd been abducted. Ma'am, one of the officers said, we need you to come with us. Ashley looked around the room desperately, like she was searching for an escape route that didn't exist. Her eyes landed on me, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for her, almost. Nathan, please, she whispered. I just needed help. I'm desperate. I know, I said quietly, but that doesn't make any of this okay. The officers led Ashley away in handcuffs while Eric comforted his crying son. Redmond packed up his briefcase with the satisfied air of a man who'd just won a particularly satisfying case. That went well, he said. Is she really looking at prison time? Probably not. First offense, family court will likely go easy on her. But the fraud charges will stick and she'll have a record. More importantly, she won't be bothering you again. After everyone left, I sat in my quiet apartment and finished my coffee. It was barely noon and I'd already survived an attempted extortion, an abduction, and a family reunion. Just another Tuesday in the life of Nathan Carter. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This isn't over. I showed it to Redmond, who was still packing up his things. Document everything, he advised. And Mr. Carter, you might want to consider changing your phone number. I looked out my window and watched Ashley's brother drive away with his son safely in the back seat. Ashley herself was probably sitting in a police station somewhere, finally getting the space she'd always wanted. Funny how things worked out. 2 weeks after Ashley's spectacular failure at extortion, I was settling into a new routine that involved checking my locks twice before bed and screening all my calls. I'd changed my phone number, installed a security system, and briefed my coworkers about my situation. Life was returning to normal, or as normal as it could be when your estranged wife was facing fraud charges. That's when Brandon Mills decided to make his grand entrance into my life. I was grabbing lunch at Murphy's Deli, a small place near my office that made excellent sandwiches and minded their own business, when a man in his mid-30s approached my table. He was tall, muscled in the way that suggested serious gym time, and wearing the kind of tight shirt that was designed to show off his physique. His smile was white, practiced, and about as genuine as Ashley's birth certificate. Nathan Carter, he said, extending a hand. I'm Brandon Mills. I think we have some mutual friends. I looked at his hand but didn't shake it. Do we? Ashley's told me a lot about you. He slid into the seat across from me without being invited. I wanted to introduce myself, maybe clear the air about a few things. So this was Ashley's boyfriend, the owner of the Armani Code Cologne, no doubt. He was exactly what I'd expected. Handsome in an obvious way, confident to the point of arrogance, and completely lacking in self-awareness. Clear the air about what? I asked, taking a bite of my sandwich. About what happened with Ashley and the kid. Look, man, I know that whole situation got out of hand. Ashley was desperate, you know. She's been struggling since you left. Since I left my cheating wife, you mean? Brandon's smile faltered slightly. Ashley says you guys just grew apart. Sometimes marriages don't work out. No hard feelings, right? I studied him for a moment. He was nervous, despite his casual demeanor, fidgeting with his phone and glancing around the restaurant like he was expecting trouble. Let me guess, I said. Ashley sent you here to soften me up. Maybe convince me to drop the charges? Nothing like that. I just thought we should meet face to face, you know? Man to man. Man to man. I set down my sandwich. Okay, Brandon, man to man, here's what I know. You've been sleeping with my wife since before our marriage ended. You probably encouraged her little extortion scheme. And now that it's blown up in both your faces, you're here to do damage control. His face flushed. You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? Tell me, how long have you and Ashley been together? That's not, because if it's longer than 3 years, that makes you an adulterer. If it's shorter than 3 years, that means you hooked up with a married woman who was facing fraud charges. Either way, your judgment is questionable. Brandon leaned forward, his friendly facade dropping completely. Look, a-hole, Ashley made a mistake. She's sorry. But dragging this through the courts isn't helping anyone. It's helping me sleep better at night. Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, you look like a bitter ex-husband who can't move on. I laughed, genuinely amused. Brandon, I moved on 3 years ago. I have a new job, a new life, and zero interest in whatever drama you and Ashley are cooking up. The only reason we're having this conversation is because she showed up at my apartment with an abducted child and fake documents. She was desperate. She was criminal. There's a difference. Brandon stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You know what your problem is, Nathan? You're a small man with a small life, and you can't stand that Ashley found someone better. I looked up at him calmly. Better? Brandon, you're dating a woman who abducts children for money. If that's your definition of better, I feel sorry for you. He stormed out, leaving me to finish my lunch in peace. But I knew this wasn't over. Men like Brandon didn't handle rejection well. And Ashley had probably filled his head with stories about what a terrible husband I'd been. They were going to try something else. I was right. 3 days later, I found a post on social media that made my blood pressure spike. Ashley had written a long, emotional piece about her abusive marriage to a controlling man who had abandoned her when she needed him most. She painted herself as a sufferer of domestic violence, a single mother struggling to survive, while her wealthy ex-husband lived in luxury. The post had been shared dozens of times and was getting sympathetic comments from people who didn't know the real story. Ashley had always been good at playing the sufferer, but this was next-level manipulation. I screenshotted everything and sent it to Redmond, then called my friend Jenna Rodriguez from work. Jenna was a cybersecurity specialist with a talent for finding information that people thought they'd hidden. More importantly, she had zero tolerance for BS. You need to see this, I said, forwarding her the social media post. Jesus, Jenna said after reading it. She's really going for the full sufferer narrative, isn't she? It gets better. Her boyfriend showed up at Murphy's yesterday trying to convince me to drop the charges. Let me guess. Tall, dark, handsome, and dumb as a box of rocks. You know him? I know the type. Give me a few hours, Nathan. I want to do some digging on both of them. Jenna called me back that evening with information that was both enlightening and disturbing. Your ex-wife has been busy, she said. She's created 3 different crowdfunding campaigns in the past 6 months, all claiming to be a single mother in need. She's raised almost $8,000 from strangers who think they're helping a domestic violence survivor. $8,000? That's not even the best part. Brandon Mills, that's the boyfriend, right? He's got his own interesting history. 2 restraining orders from ex-girlfriends, a bankruptcy from 2018, and a current lawsuit from a gym where he used to work. Apparently, he was selling steroids to clients. I absorbed this information slowly. So Ashley's running charity scams and Brandon's a pill dealer. Former pill dealer, allegedly. But yeah, that's the gist of it. Oh, and Nathan? They're living together in a house that's 3 months behind on rent. Whatever money Ashley's been raising isn't going to basic expenses. What's it going to? Based on their social media posts, expensive dinners, designer clothes, and a lot of nights out at upscale bars. They're living like they're rich while begging for money online. I felt a cold anger settling in my chest. It was one thing for Ashley to try to scam me. I could handle that. But taking money from genuine domestic violence survivors and people who thought they were helping a struggling single mother, that crossed a line. Jenna, how hard would it be to prove the crowdfunding fraud? Not hard at all. I've got screenshots of everything, and the financial records are public. Why? Because I think it's time Ashley learned what real consequences look like. The next morning, I called Redmond and outlined what Jenna had found. By noon, he'd contacted the crowdfunding platforms and the state attorney general's office. By evening, Ashley's campaigns had been suspended and she was looking at additional fraud charges. But I wasn't done. I created my own social media post, carefully worded and backed up with documentation. I explained the real story, the failed extortion attempt, the abducted child, the fake documents, and now the charity fraud. I included screenshots of Ashley's contradictory posts, photos of the forged birth certificate, and a link to the police report about her brother's missing son. I tagged every person who had shared Ashley's original post and sent copies to the local news stations in her area. Within hours, the story was spreading faster than Ashley's lies ever had. My phone rang at 9 p.m. It was an unknown number, but I answered it anyway. "You fool!" Ashley's voice was shaking with rage. "You destroyed everything." "No, Ashley, you destroyed everything. I just documented it. People are calling me a fraud. My friends won't talk to me. The police want to interview me about the crowdfunding." "Good. Maybe you'll finally face some real consequences for your actions." "This isn't over, Nathan. Brandon and you what? Going to try another scam? Going to show up at my door with another abducted child?" "Please, Ashley, enlighten me about your next brilliant plan." The line went quiet for a long moment. When Ashley spoke again, her voice was different, colder, more calculating. "You think you're so smart," she said, "but you don't know everything. Brandon has friends, Nathan. People who don't like it when their business gets disrupted." "Is that a threat?" "That's a fact. You might want to watch yourself." She hung up, leaving me staring at my phone in the quiet of my apartment. I called Redmond immediately and reported the threatening call. Then I called the police and filed a report. Finally, I called Jenna. "I think I need to take this to the next level," I told her. "What did you have in mind?" "I want to know everything about Brandon Mills, where he works, where he lives, who his friends are, and what kind of business Ashley was talking about." "Nathan, be careful. If these people are as desperate as they seem, they are, which is exactly why I need to stay ahead of them." Jenna was quiet for a moment. "Okay, but we do this smart. No vigilante stuff, no confrontations, just information gathering." "Agreed. And Nathan, if things get dangerous, we call the police immediately. Of course." But as I hung up the phone and checked my locks for the third time that night, I knew that Ashley and Brandon weren't going to give up easily. They'd escalated from fraud to threats, and I had a feeling things were about to get much worse before they got better. The war Ashley had started with her 3 a.m. breakdown 3 years ago was finally heating up. And this time I was ready for it. Jenna's research on Brandon Mills painted a picture of a man whose life was held together with duct tape, protein powder, and increasingly desperate schemes. He worked at Elite Fitness, a high-end gym where he trained wealthy clients and apparently sold them more than just workout routines. His apartment was in an expensive complex that he clearly couldn't afford, and his pride and joy was a cherry red Mustang convertible that he'd bought with money he didn't have. "The car loan is 3 months behind," Jenna told me over coffee at our usual spot. "The gym is investigating him for the steroid thing, and his landlord filed an eviction notice last week. This guy is circling the drain." "Which makes him dangerous," I said. "Exactly. Desperate people do stupid things." I was learning that firsthand. Over the past week, I'd received 6 more threatening calls from blocked numbers, had my car keyed in the office parking lot, and found a bag of dog waste on my doorstep. Ashley and Brandon were waging a campaign of petty maltreatment that was more annoying than frightening, but it was escalating. "I want to hit back," I told Jenna, "but art, legal, something that hurts without giving them ammunition to use against me." Jenna grinned. It wasn't a nice expression. "I might have some ideas." The first phase of our counterattack targeted Brandon's precious car. Jenna had discovered that he parked in the same spot at Elite Fitness every morning at 6 a.m. and didn't leave until after 8 p.m. The parking lot had security cameras, but they were old and had several blind spots. I spent a week studying Brandon's routine, watching from a coffee shop across the street as he strutted into the gym like he owned the place. He was predictable in the way that vain people often were. Same routine, same parking spot, same overwhelming need to be seen and admired on a rainy Thursday morning. I put Jenna's plan into action. The first step was simple, a small bag of glitter dumped into his air conditioning vents. When Brandon started his car that evening, the entire interior would be filled with sparkly pink dust that would take months to completely remove. It was harmless, legal, and absolutely infuriating. The second step was more elaborate. Jenna had created a batch of custom bumper stickers using high-quality adhesive and weather-resistant materials. The messages were carefully chosen to be embarrassing but not libelous. "I brake for therapy. My other car is a tricycle. And my personal favorite, honk if you've seen my dignity." I applied them to Brandon's car during his lunch break when the parking lot was busy enough that one more person walking around wouldn't attract attention. The stickers were designed to be nearly impossible to remove without damaging the paint underneath. The final touch was a business card tucked under his windshield wiper. Jenna had created it using publicly available information about anger management classes and relationship counseling services. The card simply read, "You look like you could use this. A concerned citizen." I was back at my office by 1 p.m., establishing an alibi and waiting for the fireworks. They didn't take long. At 8:40 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You're dead." I screenshotted it and forwarded it to both Redmond and the police, then settled in to wait for phase 2. Brandon showed up at Elite Fitness the next morning in what was clearly a borrowed car, a beat-up Honda that looked like it had seen better decades. Through the coffee shop window, I watched him examine his Mustang with the kind of horrified expression usually reserved for natural disasters. The glitter had worked perfectly. Even from across the street, I could see pink sparkles covering the interior like automotive fairy dust. Brandon spent 20 minutes trying to clean it out with gym towels, but glitter was immortal. He'd be finding traces of it for years. The bumper stickers were still firmly attached, despite his obvious attempts to remove them. I could see the scratches in the paint where he'd tried to scrape them off. The "honk if you've seen my dignity" sticker was particularly effective. 3 different drivers honked at him while I watched, leaving Brandon red-faced and furious. But the real payoff came that evening. I was at Murphy's Deli enjoying a quiet dinner and reading a book when Brandon burst through the door like an angry tornado. He spotted me immediately and stormed over to my table, his face flushed with rage and exertion. "You think you're funny?" he snarled, loud enough that every other customer turned to stare. I looked up from my book with mild surprise. "Brandon, you look upset. Everything okay?" "You know exactly what's wrong, you pathetic piece of crap." The entire restaurant had gone quiet. Murphy himself, a large Irish man with zero tolerance for nonsense, was watching from behind the counter with the kind of expression that suggested Brandon was about 30 seconds away from being physically ejected. "I'm afraid I don't," I said calmly. "Would you like to sit down and explain?" "Don't play dumb with me." Brandon slammed his hand on the table, making my water glass jump. "The car, the stickers, all of it. You think you can mess with me?" "Brandon, I've been working all day. I have no idea what you're talking about." It was technically true. I had been working all day. The car incident had happened during my lunch break, which was personal time. "Bees, you're the only one who would—" "Sir," Murphy's voice cut through Brandon's rant like a knife. "You need to lower your voice or leave my establishment." Brandon spun around to face Murphy, which was a mistake. Murphy was 6'4", 250 pounds, and had the kind of weathered face that suggested he'd handled his share of troublemakers. "This doesn't concern you, old man," Brandon said. Murphy's expression darkened. "When someone's causing a disturbance in my restaurant, it concerns me plenty. You've got 10 seconds to either sit down and order something or get out." Brandon turned back to me, his fists clenched. "This isn't over." "Actually," I said, pulling out my phone, "it is. I've been recording this entire conversation. You just threatened me in front of a room full of witnesses, again." Brandon's face went white as he realized his mistake. He'd walked into my territory, made a scene, and given me more evidence of maltreatment. The smart thing would have been to leave immediately. Instead, he decided to double down. "You want to play games?" he hissed, leaning over my table. "Let's play games." He reached for my phone, presumably to delete the recording. That's when I stood up. I'm not a large man. At 5'10" and 170 pounds, I'm average in almost every way. But I'd spent 4 years taking Taekwondo in college, and muscle memory is a wonderful thing. Brandon's grab for my phone turned into an awkward lunge that left him off balance and overextended. I stepped aside, caught his wrist, and used his own momentum to guide him face first into the table. It wasn't a dramatic martial arts move, just basic physics and leverage. Brandon bounced off the table and stumbled backward, more surprised than hurt. But his ego was wounded, and that made him stupid. He came at me again, this time with his fists up, like he was in a boxing match. I waited until he threw a wild right hook, then stepped inside his reach and delivered a sharp elbow to his solar plexus. He folded like a lawn chair. While Brandon was gasping for air, I calmly collected my things and walked to the counter to pay my check. "Sorry about the disturbance, Murphy," I said. "No problem at all," Murphy replied, grinning. "That was the most entertainment we've had all week." Behind me, Brandon was slowly getting to his feet, his face red with embarrassment and lack of oxygen. The other customers were openly staring, and at least 3 people had their phones out. "Brandon," I said without turning around, "you might want to leave before the police arrive. I called them when you first started making threats." He stumbled toward the door, muttering curses under his breath. As he reached for the handle, I added, "Oh, and Brandon, you might want to get those stickers professionally removed. I hear the adhesive can damage paint if you let it sit too long." He slammed the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Murphy handed me my receipt with a chuckle. "Friend of yours?" "Ex-wife's boyfriend. Long story." "Ah, say no more." I walked back to my apartment feeling better than I had in weeks. Brandon had shown his true colors in public, given me more evidence of maltreatment, and learned that I wasn't as easy a target as he'd assumed. Most importantly, he'd done it all in front of witnesses. My phone was buzzing with notifications by the time I got home. Someone had posted a video of our confrontation online, and it was already getting shared around social media. The video clearly showed Brandon as the aggressor and me defending myself with minimal force. I forwarded the video to Redmond with a note, more evidence for the maltreatment case. Then I poured myself a drink and settled in to watch the fallout. Ashley and Brandon had wanted to play games. Now they were learning that I was better at it than they were. But I knew this was far from over. If anything, I'd just made them more desperate. And desperate people, as Jenna had warned me, do stupid things. I was counting on it. The video of Brandon's humiliation at Murphy's Deli went viral in the way that only truly spectacular public meltdowns can. Within 48 hours, it had been viewed over 50,000 times, spawned dozens of memes, and earned Brandon the unfortunate nickname Glitter Boy in the comments section. More importantly, it had consequences. Elite Fitness fired Brandon on Monday morning, citing conduct unbecoming and negative publicity. His landlord, who had apparently seen the video, accelerated the eviction process. And according to Jenna's sources, several of his personal training clients had canceled their sessions after seeing their trainer get taken down by a guy who looked like an accountant. "He's in full meltdown mode," Jenna reported over lunch. Ashley, too. They're both posting increasingly unhinged rants on social media about how you've ruined their lives. "Good," I said. "Desperate people make mistakes. They're also dangerous. I think they're planning something." Jenna was right to be concerned. The maltreatment had escalated beyond phone calls and vandalism. Yesterday, I'd found Brandon sitting in his damaged Mustang outside my office building, just watching. When I'd approached with my phone ready to record, he'd driven away, but the message was clear. He knew where I worked, and he wasn't done with me. "What kind of something?" I asked. "I'm not sure yet, but they've been having a lot of private conversations with Ashley's friend Kira, the one who was supposedly giving Ashley a place to stay during your separation. Kira Williams had always been trouble. She was the kind of person who thrived on drama and chaos, the friend who encouraged bad decisions and then disappeared when the consequences arrived. If Ashley was turning to Kira for advice, it meant she was truly desperate. Can you monitor their communications? Legally? No. But I can keep an eye on their public posts and see what they're saying to mutual friends." That afternoon, Jenna's surveillance paid off. She called me at work with news that made my blood run cold. "Nathan, you need to hear this. I just got off the phone with my friend Maria. She works at the coffee shop near Ashley's apartment. Ashley and Brandon were there this morning with Kira, and they were talking about teaching you a lesson you'll never forget." "What kind of lesson?" "That's the scary part. Maria couldn't hear everything, but she caught something about making you disappear and splitting your money." I felt a chill run down my spine. They're talking about eliminating me? I don't know. Maybe, or maybe they're just trying to scare you into dropping the charges. But Nathan, these people are facing serious legal trouble because of you. Brandon's lost his job, Ashley's looking at multiple fraud charges, and they're both broke. People have eliminated for less. I hung up and immediately called Redmond. He listened to my concerns with the kind of professional calm that suggested he'd dealt with similar situations before. "Mr. Carter, I think it's time we involved law enforcement more directly. These threats have escalated beyond civil maltreatment. What do you recommend? I'm going to contact Detective Morrison at Columbus PD. She specializes in stalking and domestic violence cases. In the meantime, I want you to vary your routine, avoid being alone in isolated areas, and document everything. That evening, I met with Detective Sarah Morrison at the police station. She was a woman in her early 40s with sharp eyes and the kind of no-nonsense demeanor that inspired confidence. After reviewing my evidence, the threatening calls, the vandalism, the restaurant confrontation, and now the overheard conversation, she agreed that the situation was serious. Carter, based on what you've told me, I think these individuals are planning to escalate their maltreatment campaign. The question is, how far they're willing to go. What can you do? Officially? Not much until they actually commit a crime. But unofficially, I can have patrol cars increase their presence in your neighborhood and near your workplace. I can also have a conversation with Ms. Carter and Mr. Mills about the consequences of continued maltreatment. Will that help? Detective Morrison smiled grimly. In my experience, people like this usually back down when they realize law enforcement is watching them. But sometimes it just makes them more careful about not getting caught. She was right on both counts. The next few days were blissfully quiet. No threatening calls, no vandalism, no angry boyfriends showing up at my workplace. I began to think that maybe Ashley and Brandon had finally gotten the message. Then Jenna called with news that changed everything. Nathan, you're not going to believe this. I've been digging deeper into Ashley's finances and I've found something huge. What kind of something? She's been running a much bigger scam than we realized. The crowdfunding fraud was just the tip of the iceberg. She's been using fake identities to claim benefits, filing false insurance claims, and even stealing mail to commit identity theft. I absorbed this information slowly. How long has this been going on? At least 2 years, maybe longer. And Nathan? Brandon's involved? He's been helping her create fake documents, steal mail, and even intimidate people who got suspicious. How much money are we talking about? Conservatively, $50,000 to $60,000, maybe more. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Ashley hadn't just tried to scam me. She'd been running a criminal enterprise. And Brandon wasn't just her boyfriend, he was her partner in crime. There's more, Jenna continued. I found evidence that they've done this before. There are at least 3 other men who were targeted for fake paternity claims. 2 of them paid money before they figured out it was a scam. Jesus Christ. Nathan, these people are career criminals, and if they're talking about making you disappear, they might be serious. I called Redmond immediately and arranged an emergency meeting. Within 2 hours, we were sitting in Detective Morrison's office, going over Jenna's evidence with the kind of intensity usually reserved for major felony cases. This changes everything, Morrison said after reviewing the financial records. We're not talking about maltreatment anymore. This is organized fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. I need to bring in the FBI. The FBI? Mail theft and identity theft are federal crimes. And if they're operating across state lines, which they are, it becomes a federal case. By the end of the week, Ashley Carter and Brandon Mills were under federal investigation. Their bank accounts were frozen, their communications were being monitored, and their every move was being watched by law enforcement. But they didn't know that yet. Which is why I wasn't entirely surprised when Ashley called me on Friday evening, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Hello, Nathan. I think it's time we talked. I think you're right, Ashley. But this conversation is being recorded and I've got law enforcement on speed dial. There's no need for threats. I just want to apologize. I nearly laughed. Apologize for what specifically? The fraud, the abduction, the death threats? You'll need to be more specific. I know I made mistakes. We both did. But this has gone too far. People are getting hurt. You're right. People are getting hurt. The people you've been scamming, the children you've been exploiting, the men you've been extorting. It stops now, Ashley. Her voice hardened. You think you've won, don't you? You think your little investigation has solved everything. I think justice is finally catching up with you. Justice! She laughed bitterly. You want to know about justice, Nathan? Tomorrow night, you're going to get all the justice you can handle. The line went dead. I immediately called Detective Morrison and reported the conversation. She listened with growing concern. Mr. Carter, I think you need to consider staying somewhere else tonight. Maybe a hotel or with friends. You think they're going to try something? I think they're desperate, cornered, and running out of options. That makes them extremely dangerous. I took her advice and checked into a hotel across town, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Ashley and Brandon weren't done with me yet. They'd spent months planning their revenge, and they weren't going to give up just because the FBI was closing in. Tomorrow night, Ashley had said. Whatever they were planning, it was going to happen soon. I just hoped I'd be ready for it. Saturday evening found me sitting in my hotel room, staring at my phone and waiting for the other shoe to drop. Detective Morrison had assured me that patrol cars were watching my apartment, but Ashley's threat kept echoing in my head. Tomorrow night, you're going to get all the justice you can handle. At 9:47 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check your apartment now. I called Detective Morrison immediately. Don't go there alone, she warned. I'm sending a unit to check it out. But I was already in my car, driving toward my building with a mixture of dread and curiosity. Whatever Ashley and Brandon had planned, they wanted me to see it. That suggested they were either very confident or very stupid. I was betting on stupid. The patrol car was already in my building's parking lot when I arrived, along with Detective Morrison's unmarked sedan. I found her standing outside my apartment door with 2 uniformed officers, all of them wearing the kind of grim expressions that suggested bad news. What's the damage? I asked. See for yourself, Morrison said, stepping aside. My apartment door was standing open, revealing a scene of systematic destruction. Furniture overturned, electronics smashed, clothes scattered everywhere. Every mirror was broken, every picture frame destroyed. Someone had spray-painted cheater and liar on my walls in red letters that looked disturbingly like blood. But the real message was on my kitchen table, a manila envelope with my name written in Ashley's distinctive handwriting. We haven't touched anything, Morrison said. Crime scene techs are on their way. But Mr. Carter, you should know, whoever did this was here for a while. This wasn't random vandalism, this was personal. I stared at the envelope, knowing it contained whatever Ashley considered her final move. Can I read it? With gloves, and don't remove it from the scene. Morrison handed me a pair of latex gloves and carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a typed message. Nathan, by the time you read this, Brandon and I will be long gone. But we wanted to leave you with a little reminder of what happens to people who cross us. This is just the beginning. We know where you work, where you eat, where you shop. We know your routines, your friends, your weaknesses. You'll never be safe. You'll spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, wondering when we'll strike next. Enjoy your space, Ashley. I read the letter twice, then looked up at Morrison. They're running. Looks like it. But Mr. Carter, this is a direct threat. Combined with the breaking and entering, vandalism, and their previous maltreatment, we have enough to issue federal warrants. Will you catch them? Eventually, people like this always make mistakes. But in the meantime, you need to take this threat seriously. I walked through my destroyed apartment, cataloging the damage. They'd been thorough. Every possession I cared about was either broken or missing. My laptop, my television, my books, even my coffee maker. It was like they'd tried to erase every trace of the life I'd built since leaving Ashley. But as I surveyed the wreckage, I realized something important. None of it mattered. These were just things, easily replaced. Ashley and Brandon had spent hours destroying my apartment, but they'd only succeeded in proving how pathetic and desperate they'd become. Detective Morrison, I said, pulling out my phone, I think I know where they are. What do you mean? This whole thing, the break-in, the letter, the threats, it's theater. They want me scared, but they also want me to know they did this. That means they're not really running. They're hiding somewhere close, waiting to see my reaction. I opened my phone and started typing a social media post. Just found my apartment destroyed by my psycho ex-wife and her boyfriend. If anyone sees Ashley Carter or Brandon Mills, call the police immediately. These people are dangerous criminals who prey on innocent sufferers. I included photos of the damage, screenshots of Ashley's threatening messages, and a link to the news articles about their fraud charges. Then I tagged every mutual friend we'd ever had and posted it to every platform I could think of. What are you doing? Morrison asked. Forcing them out into the open. Ashley can't resist defending herself online, and Brandon's ego won't let him stay quiet when people are calling him a criminal. I was right. Within 30 minutes, my phone was buzzing with notifications. Ashley had responded to my post with a lengthy rant about how I was a lying, abusive ex-husband who was trying to destroy an innocent woman's life. She claimed the apartment damage was probably staged and that I was desperate for attention. But more importantly, her response was geotagged. She was posting from a location less than 5 miles from my apartment. Got them, I told Morrison, showing her the location data. The Riverside Motel, she said, recognizing the address. We'll have units there in 10 minutes. But before the police could arrive, Brandon made his own mistake. He posted a video response to my social media allegations, filmed in what was clearly a cheap motel room. In the video, he called me a pathetic loser and threatened to finish what we started if I didn't stop lying about them. The video was a gift. It showed Brandon making direct threats while sitting next to Ashley in their hiding place. More importantly, it proved they were still in the area and planning further maltreatment. Federal agents are en route to the motel, Morrison told me. This should be over soon. But Ashley and Brandon had one more surprise in store. At 11:23 p.m., my building's fire alarm started blaring. I was still in my apartment with the crime scene techs when the evacuation order came over the intercom. This isn't a coincidence, I told Morrison as we headed for the stairs. She was already on her radio, calling for backup in the fire department. Mr. Carter, stay close to me. If this is another one of their stunts, she didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. We both knew that Ashley and Brandon were escalating their campaign of maltreatment into something much more dangerous. The building was evacuating in orderly chaos, residents streaming down the stairwells in their pajamas and bathrobes. I was on the 3rd floor landing when I saw him. Brandon Mills, wearing a maintenance uniform and carrying what looked like a toolbox. He spotted me at the same moment I saw him, and his face twisted into a snarl of rage and recognition. "You!" he shouted, pushing through the crowd of evacuating residents. "This is all your fault!" Detective Morrison was already reaching for her weapon, but Brandon wasn't armed, just angry and stupid. He charged at me, through the crowd like a bull seeing red. I had about 2 seconds to decide how to handle this. I could try to run, but that would endanger the other residents. I could let Morrison handle it, but she was 10 feet away and Brandon was closing fast. Instead, I did something that surprised everyone, including myself. I stepped aside and let Brandon's momentum carry him straight into the stairwell railing. He hit it hard, bounced off, and tumbled down half a flight of stairs before coming to rest in a groaning heap. The entire stairwell went silent except for the fire alarm and Brandon's moans of pain. "Brandon Mills," Detective Morrison announced, stepping over his prone form with her badge visible. "You're under arrest for breaking and entering, vandalism, terroristic threats, and about 6 other felonies I'll think of on the way to the station." As the uniformed officers who'd been waiting outside took Brandon into custody, Morrison turned to me with something that might have been admiration. "Nice work, Mr. Carter. Very restrained. I've had a lot of practice lately." The fire department determined that there was no actual fire. Someone had pulled the alarm as a distraction. But by then, federal agents had arrested Ashley at the motel, where they'd found evidence of the break-in, plans for further maltreatment, and enough fraudulent documents to keep prosecutors busy for months. 3 hours later, I was sitting in Detective Morrison's office giving my final statement about the evening's events. Ashley and Brandon were both in federal custody, facing charges that would likely put them away for several years. "It's over, Mr. Carter," Morrison said. "They're not going to bother you again." I looked out the window at the sunrise, breaking over Columbus, and felt something I hadn't experienced in months: peace. Ashley had wanted space 3 years ago. Now she was going to have all the space she could handle in a federal prison cell. Brandon had wanted to teach me a lesson about consequences. Instead, he'd learned one himself. And me? I was finally free. "Detective Morrison," I said, standing up to leave, "thank you for everything. Just doing my job. But Mr. Carter, next time someone asks for space, maybe just give them a map instead of a divorce." I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. "I'll keep that in mind." As I walked out of the police station into the morning sunlight, my phone buzzed with a text from Jenna. "Saw the news, coffee later. I want to hear everything." I typed back, "Absolutely, and Jenna, thank you for everything." That's what friends are for. Besides, someone had to make sure you didn't do anything stupid. Like what? Like, give your psycho ex-wife the satisfaction of seeing you break. I smiled and put my phone away. Ashley Carter had spent 3 years trying to destroy my life. and all she'd accomplished was proving that I was stronger than either of us had realized. She'd wanted space to burn in. Now she had it, and I had my life back.